The intertidal zone, a majestic place where a myriad of changes can happen in just a few short hours. No other earthly biome is such affected by the moon. The great celestial body pulls and tugs upon the heartstrings of the intertidal zone and its inhabitants. Throughout the day, this singular environment can change from a sun-soaked landscape without the life-giving dew of the ocean to a submerged oasis. The intertidal zone is described as the area of the coast where it is regularly exposed to air at low tide and underwater at high tide. Each of these characteristics situated at high and low tide can provide a wealth of opportunity to the right organism. But both extremes are not without their dangers. Here, we explore the nuances and inner workings of the intertidal zone. They are filled with complexities that astound the minds of many. So come with us as we journey into the wonderful world between the tides.
Hey guys, welcome to the High Intertidal Zone. We're your experts. I'm Maya Selesnik.
And I'm Naya Mahler.
The High Intertidal Zone is the farthest from the ocean and the most terrestrial of all the zones. All intertidal organisms rely on water to sustain themselves and all their essential functions. Due to this zone's terrestriality, the organisms within it cannot rely on water to be there all the time. As the tide goes in and out, organisms may have a high amount of water to rely on for their essential functions or none at all. Due to this, organisms experience desiccation, which is the process of drying out. For humans, it's basically to us as drowning. To survive in this habitat, organisms have been forced to adapt to their environments. Both flora and fauna have evolved to have unique, variable adaptations to this environment and to survive desiccation.
Desiccation. So now we're going to look at a couple organisms that help to produce an adaptation that combats desiccation. So we have a couple acorn barnacles here, and we have a couple gooseneck barnacles here, as well as one little mussel. Oh, there goes the mussel. What's important about these guys is they have these nice plates on here, and as well as in those plates holds their thorax and head, which contains their feeding appendages. Now when the tide goes out, these feeding appendages go back in their little house here, and the plates close up. The reason for that is it's holding its moisture in and protecting from any potential predators. Same with our gooseneck barnacle here. It has those same plates and the same serial fan that is used for feeding, but when that tide goes out, everything's closed up to hold any moisture that they can. Now right now I have a little mussel, but these guys can get pretty big. And when that tide goes out and when they're combating wave action, they actually have these abyssal threads that they attach to the surface to keep themselves steady and not be pulled back into the ocean. Yet they're found all over here on these dry spots. So what allows them to do that is that they close up their nice valves here, which are their shells, they're bivalved. And to do that, they're retaining their moisture, as I mentioned with the barnacles. And when the tide comes back in, they can open that again, and water will flow into their mantle cavity, both rehydrating and bringing them particles to feed on. Now here we have a couple gastropods with us. Now what makes these guys unique, we got a limpet here and a black turban snail. Now the limpet has a big old foot on the bottom. And what that allows it to do is when it's in these high zone areas where desiccation is really common, it will stick itself to the rock face and it will use its nice big foot to suction cup itself and allow all the liquid in its mantle cavity to stay put and not dry out. Similar thing happens with the black turban snail, but in addition, it has a nice operculum, which is like a trap door. And if it gets plucked off, it will actually close that little trap door to keep, again, all that fluid in itself. And if it doesn't get plucked off and it's sticking on that rock face, it will go ahead and stick its big old foot on the rock and keep all that moisture in itself.
Despite the looming fate of desiccation with the incoming tides and outgoing tides, organisms in the high intertidal zone have adapted strong defenses for desiccation.
As we move down the intertidal zones, more and more change in an increasingly small amount of space. Here in the middle zone, the very nature of its geography ensures nothing here stays the same for very long. Let's see how organisms deal with the shifting, transient nature of this zone.
The mid-intertidal zone is defined by its balance of both abiotic and biotic factors. Abiotic being things like temperature and desiccation, and biotic being things like predation and competition for space. These factors in the intertidal zone are the main defining characteristics of the mid-intertidal zone. Take a shot every time I say zone. Along with these abiotic factors I stated before, the mid-intertidal zone is defined by its various predator-prey interactions and competition for space. These factors coincide with the abiotic factors I stated before when it comes to things like tide and wave action, leading to a fine balance in the mid-intertidal zone of these factors. The fauna here have a variety of adaptations to deal with these exposure conditions, such as the colonial anemone you see here, curling up in on itself to hold on to the remaining water inside its body during low tide. Other fauna, such as the sculpin, goes into tide pools to avoid the low tide, and crabs move in and out of this intertidal zone with the incoming and outgoing tides. Predation in the mid-intertidal zone is pretty high. One of the main players is the ochre sea star, which is responsible for culling the populations of mussels, barnacles, gastropods, and urchins. These guys define how all of these other species interact in the tide pools by controlling their populations, like I just mentioned. I know, crazy, right? Now, the main biotic factor in the mid-intertidal zone is predation, which is very prevalent, as you can see here. The life here in the mid-intertidal zone has a myriad of adaptations, though, to deal with wave exposure. As you can see here, these are limpets. They have very compact shells that lay close to the rock, and when waves come in, they just roll right over. When the tides flux, the waves come into play another major role in the mid-intertidal zone. These waves create a lot of disturbance, moving rocks, dislodging organisms, and changing the substrate as a whole.
As the great Lil Jon once said, it's time to get low. Let's move on down to the low zone. Welcome to a world rife with life, teeming with activity. Here, anything that can't survive out of the water thrives. Let's take a deeper dive into what makes this zone so unique.
Hi, I'm Fiona, and behind me is the low zone intertidal. Right here where we're standing is the middle, so you can see that low zone is entirely submerged underwater. The low zone has a variety of species that can't handle desiccation, so they need to stay underwater the entirety of the time. Down there we have seagrasses, seaweeds, algae, and it provides a great place for predators and prey. The prey species down here are primarily encrusting species and crabs and sponges. Fish and larger crabs are the main predators here. We have rockfish, and they're fish. They can only be underwater, and they come around to feed during low tides and high tides, anytime that they can feed underwater when the water is high enough. Low zone species tend to migrate with the tide. So when the tide is high, they can come up to the middle zone, and when the tide is low, they stay in the low zone. The primary factor affecting low zone species is predation, because they don't have quite as much wave action to jostle them around like the middle zone.
As you can see, there is such a wide variety in the shapes, colors, and adaptations of the organisms in the intertidal. From the rock-hard shells and moisture retention capabilities of the limpets, mussels, and barnacles, to the scavenging, predatory lifestyle of the ochre sea star, the intertidal zone is a shimmering showcase for the different ways creatures adapt to living in such an environment. As we went from the high zone and its desiccation dangers, to the busy mid-zones wild with different adaptations, to the watery low zone and the predators lurking around every corner, we saw such a wide range of niches. This is what makes the intertidal zone so fascinating. It is a melting pot of biodiversity. We hope you've enjoyed this trip with us, Between the Tides.